Hello and welcome to Riff Vues. Now, as you know, I am a huge Dead Rising fanboy. It's probably my favorite series that has had its genesis in the last console generation, and I eat up anything that's Dead Rising related. Now, this is what I mean when I say that I am a Dead Rising fanboy. I actually have a copy of this. This is ZQ magazine, a parody of GQ, obviously, although that Z is a little hard to read. This was the promotional materials that was sent out by Capcom to journalists before Dead Rising 2 came out. Instead of, like a boring slideshow, PowerPoint presentation, this is actually a nice glossy magazine that covers what the game entails, backstory on it, the usual stuff. And I actually got this through IGN, and this is one of the things I'm most proud about, because this was not available for retail consumption. It was not available to the public. That said, I have tried to make this review video for Dead Rising 4 for a couple weeks now. I've been trying to approach it from different angles, but it just hasn't clicked. Now, this game has been pretty derisive among gamers, and it's somewhat telling that the game has been out for 2 months, and the holiday price drop never returned the full retail price. In fact, I'm doing this review because Capcom is about to drop a patch that supposedly addresses some of the glitches. Hopefully they'll fix the achievement for 100%ing the game, and they're adding increased difficulties, and they're, for some reason, including Street Fighter skins, because. Now, I may be a professed fanboy, but I'd like to think of myself as fair. So I'm going to try to give a balanced review, recognize what people who enjoyed Dead Rising 4 liked, while also addressing what really annoyed us longtime fans of the series. Now, there will be a spoiler section, but I'll save that for the end. Let's get the bad out of the way first, shall we? For starters, I have taken to referring to this game as DRAINO. Dead Rising, albeit in name only. Okay, maybe I stretched it in order to infringe upon that trademark, but I think you get the point. Capcom stated that this was a return to roots for the series. Frank West back in Willamette. Except this Frank looks completely different, acts different, and even has a different voice actor. And Willamette? What exactly do we know about Willamette?
Here she is. Willamette, Colorado. Population 53,594. Distinguishing characteristics? Jack shit. About the only thing to do in this town is kill time at the shopping mall.
We had a couple of streets and a mall, and that was it. The setting of Dead Rising 4 could have been just about anywhere else. Hell, it could have been Owasso, Michigan. It didn't matter. Oh, yeah, while I'm thinking about it, why the heck does it seem like Willamette Memorial Mall, the new major tourist attraction and largest mall in the world, why is it so difficult to get into? The town centers around it, but it's a pain to actually get to it. Maybe that was just me. Most of the things that define Dead Rising as something other than just another sandbox beat-em-up were inexplicably removed. Dead Rising is not just about zombies. It's about time and resource management. The series was never designed to have a perfect playthrough on the first go. You could focus on the missions, or focus on the survivors, or you could push yourself and try to do both. This game removed the timer completely, and I can understand why some people like that. Personally, the timer gave a nice sense of urgency and tension. I felt Dead Rising 3's timer, even on Nightmare mode, was way too generous. To see it removed completely takes away one of the main staples of the game. I've heard some theorize that a benefit of the timer is to encourage exploring the world. That would be nice, but the world is pretty empty, other than collectibles laying around like newspapers or blueprints. But once you get all of those, there really isn't much incentive to explore much. You're not going to stumble upon a hidden survivor or a psychopath. Oh, wait. There are no psychopaths. There are maniacs, which end up just being otherwise forgettable humans with a posse. No cutscenes or dialogue to make them interesting or even memorable. Even if the psychopaths from the third game were not on par with the previous two, they were still memorable. And speaking of memorable, let's talk about the survivors for a moment. In previous games, they at least had some context. You had everything from Leah, whose baby was eaten, to BB Love, who starts as a psychopath but ends up joining your crew. Now, I know some people hated the escort missionness of survivors. Again, Dead Rising 3 had a neat balance. Some survivors just need a hand and then they'll take care of themselves, while others you can not only escort back to your shelter, but you can call them up for help. Seriously, I love that in 3. Pulling up a posse of survivors, arming them, and then just going to town. In this game, survivors are such an afterthought that the game doesn't even bother to keep track of who they are. Just drive a block away and come back and suddenly it's a completely different survivor in their place. The game doesn't care, so why should I? They're just fodder to level up my shelters anyway. Heck, some lose their names completely at that point and just become weapon vendor or food vendor. So with those complaints out of the way, let's talk about some of the good things. I actually like this take on Frank West for starters. Sure, I would have preferred if TJ returned to voice the character, but I felt the new voice actor actually did a pretty decent job. He was amusing at times.
In my strong suit. Just kind of stuffy in here, don't you think? A little fresh air, you know. I really thought that would work.
And he even had a few one-liners that I chuckled at. Now, some have complained that Frank is a childish jerk, but remember, it has been 11 years in-game since Dead Rising 2 Case West, and this guy has been crapped on since Dead Rising 1. The guy has a grudge and wants to, pardon the pun, get back into the game. I have mentioned in other videos that I love it when games add a little world flavor, giving you an idea of what life in Willamette is/was like. And the game has this in spades with the personal investigations. Now, some of them are funny, some are sad, and some are just bizarre. Plus, they do give you little clues as to what some of the characters from previous games are up to. Now, granted, it's no more an investigation than me picking up an old newspaper from months ago and saying, "Yep, Green Bay beat the Lions, mystery solved." But they're fun and interesting regardless, as you can learn what life was like in Willamette as they were rebuilding the town. Now, I know many have said that the photography is ripped off straight from the Batman Arkham games, but I loved it. And let's be honest, you could play Dead Rising 1 start to finish and never use your camera once. You can ignore or kill Kent, but other than that, you never really needed to use your camera at all. All the major photography was done in cutscenes, and I think some people forget about that when they look back with nostalgia. But in this game, the photography was even kind of fun. The silly investigation parts mostly. The camera was actually used in a meaningful way in this game, and that is technically a first for this series. Now, the holiday setting. I'll be honest, I fall on the bah humbug side of the scale when it comes to the holidays, but it really worked as the background to this game. Maybe it's because the third game was so dreary and brown that this popped more in the game. Maybe it was the irony of killing mindless hordes of zombies during a time of being kind to your fellow man. Maybe that's what I enjoyed. I don't know, but it worked. And also the car radios playing Christmas music and various local commercials, it was a nice touch and pretty enjoyable. I found myself listening to those more than I would have expected. there's a few other random points that I would like to address. I thought Dead Rising 3 was easy. Oh boy. DRAINO is a frickin' cakewalk. I only died twice in my entire playthrough. The first time was actually on purpose. I wanted to see what would happen if Frank died in the opening dream sequence. While it did give a game over, it did not count against me. The second time I died, which was totally my fault, was near the end of the game. I was not paying attention to what was going on, and when I noticed that the flames were doing more damage than I thought, I died right as I was healing. Dying in this game is actually kind of embarrassing. Now, if you notice those numbers in white by my health, those are my unspent skill points. I stopped using them around level 8, I think. I wanted to see if the game ever became difficult to the point where I needed to use them. Not really. Maybe I'll finally use them when the added difficulty patch is released. Another thing that's missing from this game that really irritates me are save points. Seriously, who decided that? Has there ever been anyone who has never had an automated save system screw them over? I've always looked at autosaves as being a backup, but not the main system. I got into the habit of taking a picture before ending a play session just to trigger the autosave, although you were never quite guaranteed what items would be in your possession or what checkpoint it would put you at when you started back up. The worst part is that the story, as well as the game design, is all over the place. Why would Frank even live close enough to Willamette that it's a car ride away, close enough to be fooled that he was going to play mini-golf? And after Case Zero, why does Vic hate Frank so much? She seemed more like a jilted lover than anything. Oh, and by the way, what was up with that infamous style open during the Black Friday bit? That was just kind of out of the blue, and they never went to that style again. It just was really jarring and out of place. Oh, and how exactly did the government keep the zombie outbreak, an outbreak at ground zero of the original outbreak years ago? How did they keep that secret for 6 weeks? To be honest, that seemed pretty damn arbitrary of a time frame. But there's more story stuff, but I'm going to touch on that in the spoilers section at the end. Most of the leads on this game have never worked on a Dead Rising game before, and it shows. There's a soul, a certain je ne sais quoi, that is just missing from this game. If the focus is on killing zombies in interesting ways, instead of the timer and rescuing survivors, then why are there only about half the weapons as in the previous game? And why am I limited to so many thrown weapons, so many melee weapons, and so many long-range weapons? I would love to give up slots for, say, grenades, in order to carry more baseball bats, which is kind of a moot point since anything that is not a combo weapon really isn't worth your time. Oh, and your health items? Yeah, good luck knowing what you picked up. That's an afterthought too. No item mixing. Is your item an apple? Is it a health pack? Who knows? Game doesn't allow you to see that. You just have a cross at the bottom. Again, why? You see, this game feels like a bullet-pointed game pitch presentation come to life. I mean, exosuits. So you can even combo Frank. Except that they only last a couple minutes, and you'll spend 30 seconds of that getting to a place where you can effectively use the suit. Stealth mode. Seriously, just why? Half the time it doesn't work well, and the other half of the time you're going into stealth mode because you were actually trying to run and you didn't quite hold down the shoulder button long enough. And don't even get me going on the whole scrap mechanic. Okay, I know that the weapon locker of Dead Rising 3 was a game breaker, but a longer cooldown time would have been better than punching an ATM to get thousands of scrap, which I still haven't figured out. Is Frank scrapping the ATMs, or is he just withdrawing scrap instead of cash? Because they still look fine afterwards. And why are the vendors selling things if they're not going to have some of the harder items to find? Like zombie meat. Hell, I'd have a food vendor trying to sell me stuff when there were items of food on the ground right next to them. I just felt that there were so many missed opportunities. Sure, it was nice to be able to drive long distances without hitting roadblocks like in Dead Rising 3. And if you did, you could push cars out of the way, but the world still felt empty. For example, there was a commercial on one of the car radios that talked about a graveyard where the ghost of Jesse McCartney was supposedly sighted. Now, Jessie is my waifu, so I was hoping that they might have included a scene with her ghost or a vision or something. I mean, why not? The game has zombies and even sadistic claws who, we got these teleporting, maniacs. Why not? I mean, with the removal of the actual psychopaths, fan service like that would have gone a long way. Now, I'm really not trying to be negative. DRAINO is still a fun game. I really did have a blast killing zombies, but in an effort to reach a large audience, all the things that made Dead Rising what it is were just thrown to the wayside. Now, I'm not saying that this game gave me cancer or it's the worst thing ever, but it really is disappointing, especially the way they try to appeal to longtime fans like myself. So if you're like me, the only thing I could suggest is sending Capcom a message. Buy the older games again, now that they've been released for the PS4 and the Xbox One. Maybe we can drill it in that we want more of the older game style, and not the Dead Rising that DRAINO felt like. For the newer fans that didn't like the timer, maybe something closer to Dead Rising 3's Relax Timer with a separate sandbox mode that off the record did perfectly. In the end, this is a fun, but only okay game. But it's a bad Dead Rising game. Thank you for sticking around to the spoiler section. Now, I do want to touch upon some things that are spoilers for the story. First off, let's talk about Dr. Barnaby. He was the scientist that originally caused the outbreak that led to the destruction of Santa Cabeza. In the first game, it seemed like a tragic, unfortunate mistake. But in this game, we find that he went full-on mad scientist, seeking the key for eternal life. He moved to Willamette, opened a winery as a cover for his secret lab, and his last notes imply that he's on his way to meet Carlito because he recognized Santa Cabeza accent? None of this makes any goddamn sense. Everyone talks about the change of Frank's portrayal, but Barnaby's was by far the worst. What the game is saying is that Carlito just happened to choose the town that Barnaby was secretly experimenting in. Or if Carlito did know Barnaby was in that town, why didn't he just kidnap him in the first place? Why would Barnaby even go to meet someone whose accent he recognized so accurately as being from Santa Cabeza? He knew nothing good would come from that and just hoped to get back to his regen chamber thing. And plus, somehow his winery survived the firebombing after the Wilmette incident, and yes, it was firebombed according to the newspapers in this very game. And his experiments weren't that badly damaged? In fact, it was known that Barnaby, the guy that inadvertently created a zombie plague in Santa Cabeza, was living in Willamette, the town that was later overrun by zombies, and no one in the government put two and two together to thoroughly check his property until many, many years later? I appreciate what the writers tried to do, but they really screwed it up, and it comes off as completely ham-fisted. The second thing I wanted to touch on, the supposed death of Frank West. It's bad enough that DRAINO has only one ending and no timer, but Frank Rising was announced before the game's release, stating that he was freshly infected and had to fight the clock in order to not become a zombie. Which pretty much sounds like Overtime Mode is now paid DLC. Now, Granted, we don't know that for sure yet, and maybe Frank Rising takes place on, say, day 5. But come on, I think we pretty much know it's going to take place after Frank's quote-unquote death. A death that I don't believe for an instant. Remember, this is a guy that lasted hours, maybe days in Dead Rising 1 after being infected, and whereas most succumbed within minutes. Isabella even said that everyone reacts differently. Frank has a greater constitution than the average person. Plus, he has the original proto-version of Zombrex that Isabella made in his system. Even Isabella didn't know how long her serum would last. Plus, he has Zombrex after that. And now, he has been cured since Dead Rising 3. He has one hell of a cocktail running through his system now, so I doubt being gang-piled by fresh zombies would kill him. In fact, this is not even the first time we've seen a game end with Frank against hopeless odds. But no, Capcom Vancouver just wanted to end the game on a poignant note and hide the "tur" ending behind a paywall. Well, thank you for sitting through my belated review of DRAINO. I mean Dead Rising 4, I'll stop that. I hope for so much more from this game, and was pretty disappointed to see what it became.
This is where the story would end.
Now, I am curious to see what those who are new to the series, or those that felt that this was a better game than its predecessors, what you guys think. Why do you think it's better? Did this game make you want to go back and play the earlier ones? And what would you like to see in Dead Rising 5? As always, thanks for watching.